Hello and welcome to Behind the Scenes, a podcast where we explore the intersection of art, culture, and big ideas. Here, my name is Sean Malone, the creative director for the Foundation for Economic Education and creator of the Out of Frame video essay series on YouTube. Here, as usual, with Jen Mafasanti, who is the director of communications for the Libertas Institute in Utah, and of course, Paul Nelson, our own senior marketing manager and head of social media. How are you guys doing today?
I'm feeling vengeful.
Ooh, you are the vengeance? Are you the vengeance?
Yeah, I feel like this episode, after last week's episode, it's something like good movie has come back with a vengeance.
For those who missed it last week, we talked about Uncharted. And Jen was not here for that episode, and she was probably grateful for that to some extent. Jen, did you actually watch Uncharted? Even,
I bought my movie ticket and then I meant to go see it just anyway and didn't.
You literally just didn't go.
I just didn't. I had a lot going on that weekend. It was it's not great, and it just completely slipped my mind.
Well, I don't
think
you missed that much. Yeah, I think you were fine. But this week, you didn't really want to miss. I feel like this has been one of the more anticipated movies for me for the last 6 months or so at this point.
Yeah, I have been champing at the bit for this one for a while.
It's an interesting one too, because I think there have been a lot of ups and downs. We're going to be talking about the Batman today, which when Robert Pattinson was announced, I think what happened was what happens repeatedly when they make a Batman casting announcement. It's like, oh no, this is going to be a disaster and he's going to be a terrible Batman. And so that kind of went for a bit. And then there was production delays and problems. I mean, obviously even before that, there was the whole idea of Ben Affleck doing a standalone Batman movie. And then that didn't happen. And then, all that kind of stuff was kind of a mess. And then, honestly, for me, and I don't know about you guys, but we started seeing trailers or teasers for it. And once I started seeing teasers, I was like, you know what? That actually looks pretty good. And each successive teaser got a little bit better for me. It made me more interested in seeing it over the last 6 months or so. So
it was top-notch marketing. I'll give them that.
Well, I don't know did you guys feel the same way? Were you bought in initially, or were you kind of skeptical and then?
Nah, I mean, when they announced Robert Pattinson was Batman, I was pretty upset because I wanted a Ben Affleck standalone Batman, because I did too. He just was kind of misused, and everyone.
Yeah, everybody was misusing
it. So I was upset at that by that. But like you said, as they started releasing footage, teaser trailers and full trailers, it quickly turned into excitement for me, which is rare. I rarely get excited about movies nowadays because most of the time they just stink, like Uncharted.
It stinks.
Got to try to keep this PG.
Does anybody get the reference, by the way? Am I literally the only one who's ever seen The Critic? I think I am.
I mean, maybe.
That is a Matt Groening produced series starring John Lovitz as a film critic, which lasted 2 or 3 seasons. I don't know. Anyway,
what's
fantastic.
Happened to John Lovitz?
I don't know.
What's he up to nowadays?
He did some kind of a Subway ad or something. I don't remember. He was in some kind of a marketing campaign for something. He was also on Holy Moly, the mini golf show hosted by Rob Riggle. Sorry, we're going wildly off the rails from Batman here, but he played a one-eyed pirate captain or maybe a blind pirate captain who, depending on your situation, he would putt for you in the game.
Yeah, that sounds about right for that show.
All right.
Which,
or actually, chip. It was actually a chip. He had to chip over water or whatever, and he had to do that blindfolded.
Keep getting those checks. Good for him.
I love that show.
It's great. It's
unabashed. The show is ridiculous.
It's Wipeout meets Putt Putt, and I'm here for it.
Steph Curry's in it. It's like Steph Curry is
Joe
the golf
Tessitore.
course. Steph Curry is like the golf course designer.
Yeah.
Paul, I don't know why you would get into it.
Well,
this should be right up your alley.
It should be, but I feel like it's an amalgamation of too many things.
There's no reason the show should work, and yet it does. Yeah. It really, really does.
100%. No, but you're also right. It's Wipeout meets, like comedy every sketch. Dumb golf show you've ever heard of meets it's insane.
Paul, it's a comedy show, and I like it.
That means it sucks.
How dare you?
Oh man! All right, let's get back on the rails here. Batman. Talking about Batman, folks. Talking about the Batman.
I was excited about this movie from the jump. Like Robert Pattinson. Okay, so we went through the Twilight years for Robert Pattinson, bless his heart, and then there was a lull in his career, and he just like came back with a vengeance. He was in The Lighthouse. He was in Tenet, and I was like, he's got the chops. Let's see what he can do with the physicality. And he did not disappoint. I was just really excited about it.
I do wonder how much of that was him, because there were set rumors that he was like kind of difficult to work with, and also that he didn't want to get in shape for Batman, which
he had his shirt off. He looked pretty in shape.
Honestly, he looked okay. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say, like, by superhero movie standards, he was not as cut as Kumail Nanjiani was in
right. But I think it works. Though. I think it works.
I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying, like, I don't know that
Batman
he did.
Career here.
Also, the muscles that the Marvel superheroes guys have, you don't need them. Like, they're just superficial for looks muscles. And his Batman, the way he looks like an in shape person that has more than an average muscle mass. I mean, like, this is a weird conversation we're having right now, but it's in context of the movie and the setting and we'll talk about all this stuff. It works. So I was kind of surprised when I heard about that.
More nimble than your average human person. So
let's get into the plot of this movie. So because this is a mystery story. I mean, this is meant to be sort of a mystery detective thriller, basically. So there are things that we can legitimately spoil in this movie. So I want to try to avoid doing that. What I will do up front is say, like, this is as spoiler free as I can get it, basically. But like, the plot is essentially Batman has been Batman in Gotham for about 2 years at this point. He is working with Detective Gordon and the Gotham Police Department at this point periodically. A lot of the other policemen don't like him. And, I don't know, but they at least know he exists, right, at this point. So they're aware of him. He's been called in because the mayor got murdered in his own home, and there's a note left for the Batman at the crime scene. And so he gets brought in to start dealing with what fairly quickly we realize is a serial killer out to kill mobsters and corrupt government officials throughout Gotham. And the plot of the movie, for the most part, is really about Batman trying to solve that mystery and figure out who the mysterious, in this case, it is the Riddler, but figure out who the Riddler is, why they're doing what they're doing exactly, and stop them. And it's really very different from any Batman movie I think we've seen at any point so far. It actually takes the world's greatest detective idea a lot more seriously than a lot of previous Batman movies. It is like desperately trying to be a really dark and gritty noir type of film, and the tone is very much that. I mean, just there's narration that is like very hard-boiled detective kind of noir narration at the beginning and a few other points throughout the film. It's interesting to me. It's a really, there are a lot of things about this movie that I really liked, and then there are actually also a lot of things that I really hated. So I kind of want to get into that. With some of those things, we'll get into spoilers. But before we do, Paul, Jen, what were your sort of initial reactions? Paul, I'll start with you.
So not getting into spoilers, I absolutely love this movie. This is my favorite rendition of any Batman on screen is the Batman the animated series from the 90s. And to me, that is what Batman is. And this is the closest thing that I've seen since get to that. And it surprised me, honestly. I was excited for it because of the trailers, like I said, but it was so much better than I was expecting. The score is fantastic. The cinematography is just some of the best I've seen in a superhero movie. And the story isn't necessarily a whodunit. It's a why they done it, which was interesting. But also,
and what will they do next?
Right, and why? Yeah, it's all that stuff. And I am a sucker for noir detective crime movies, so this just ticked all of my boxes, and I am excited for however many more they make of these because I'm there for them. This is the first time I have seen a movie in years where I am contemplating paying money to go watch it a second time in the theater. I that never happens. And the only thing I could think of is maybe The Fat Man. Maybe
if you'd seen that in the theater, that would have been yeah.
But this is like I thinking about this movie, talking about it more with you guys now. It's just like I want to go see it again because it is that good.
Jen?
I also really enjoyed this movie. It wasn't like my favorite movie ever. I don't know that I would go so far as to say that I love this movie, but I think I could come to love this movie. It's long and it's a lot to take in just one viewing.
Yeah.
I am 100% going to be watching it at least one more time. I am going to, full disclosure. I have lost count of how many times I have watched Batman Begins, the Chris Nolan movie. And it kind of was with me through like a really tough part of my life. And so it holds like a really special place in my heart. But I think this one could give it a run for its money. I am once again in a tough part of my life. And I went to the theater and watched this movie, and it has pathos to it. Like I felt feelings and it was good. It was a good movie. I want to keep feeling feelings and watching this movie.
Yeah, that is the biggest thing for me is just this was in the era of Marvel BS that's just so bad. And there was a Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness trailer for my screening, and I am just whatever the opposite of excited is in the dictionary, I am that. But this has actually had an interesting story to tell, and in an interesting way that hasn't been done yet. And I'm so glad that DC has maybe just by been forced into this, but it actually trying different things and not just fancy CGI.
So let me run through a list of things that I liked and sort of I'm going to try to continue to do this without getting too much into spoilers, but I'll run through some of the things that I liked and some of the things I disliked, because I think I'm like probably of the three of us like the most down on this movie. And it's not, I want to be clear, like I don't like dislike it. I didn't think it was a bad movie. I thought just to a large extent, I feel like many of my criticisms are missed opportunities. Some things I think are genuinely bad. A thing that I disliked, I think the editing has a lot of problems. And I think the movie itself is 3 hours long. It could have easily been 2 hours and 20 minutes, somewhere in that territory, and you wouldn't have lost anything. In fact, you would have gained quite a bit in pacing, because for me, I think the movie struggles a lot with pacing, especially throughout the first hour and a half or so. And I'll talk when we get into spoilers. I'll talk about why I think that is, because I think that there's I can't talk about it without spoiling like some of the kind of major plot points. I liked Robert Pattinson as Batman. Generally, I really loved Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman. I also surprisingly really like, well, I don't know about surprisingly, because I think Colin Farrell in general is a really top-notch actor. I like what they did with Penguin in this movie. I liked what in fact, I would broaden that out and say I liked what they did with Batman's Rogues Gallery in general, because they actually introduced a number of Batman, like classic Batman villains, but they didn't. They connected for the purposes of the plot and for the story of the film, but it wasn't like the end of Batman Forever or Batman and Robin, where there's like 17 different villains all, with their own plot and machinations and whatever. Like it was literally just, it was a pretty core story around the Riddler, but we still got to meet some of these other characters. And I think that was really smart, because I think that's a good way for them to leave themselves room for the future. They've introduced some people. They've introduced Penguin, for example, but not. And also, Penguin in this case is like the crime boss kind of Penguin. He's not a circus freak, circus performer kind of vibe. Nobody is in this movie, which is kind of interesting. Other things I didn't like. I did not particularly care for Paul Dano, to be honest. I did not particularly care for and in general, I think the third act has pretty major problems as well. And this is maybe nitpicky, but I don't understand why Batman is now bulletproof. There's elements of that where I thought it would have been cool, and like what you see in the trailer is cool, but they take it to a level where he is basically impenetrable from any angle, which doesn't make any sense for what they've actually established. And that ended up bothering me, because it ended up creating a situation where the stakes were undercut for Batman, which I didn't particularly care for. There are a handful of other things that we'll have to talk about in spoilers, but I think all in, like, I really liked the tone. I really liked, and Paul, you already nailed some of these things. The music is overwhelmingly great. It's a little bit monotonous in some parts, but I think, again, this is more due to the editing than the score. I think that, in a lot of ways, it gets to the feel, the mood of Batman the Animated Series as a detective story in a way that no other Batman on screen has done, at least since, honestly, I would say ever. In live action, because you can go back to like the Adam West stuff, but the tone is so different. And like he did a lot of detectiving, right? Like he did a lot of like crime solving, but it's so goofy that it's not really the same thing. This is like a David Fincher movie done, with Batman, basically trying to solve problems. A lot of that worked really well. And I think that the overall story of politicians, like Gotham City politicians being in bed with the mob, I think is something that's, I mean, again, it's kind of a timeless Batman trope, but it's also like pretty, kind of present, right? Like it's pretty relevant to today.
Everyone hates corruption.
Yeah.
Until you're corrupt yourself, then you love it. But it's always a good one to go back to.
Yeah.
So, all right. So do you want to just jump into spoilers and talk about some of the specific things? Because I'd like to talk more about like the plot.
Yeah,
I'd also like to talk about the mob stuff.
Yeah, I definitely want to hear more about, because your list of grievances with the Batman, I don't necessarily disagree. The only one I disagree with is the first hour and a half. I mean, I love the first part of the movie. The third act, I think, is where it started to. I'm
gonna agree with Paul on that one. I really like a slow burn for a detective story.
All right, then this is why we got to jump into spoilers, because I got to explain why. Because I think the first hour and a half, almost 2 hours, I think is why it's a big piece of why the third act doesn't work for me. So my beef, and all right, so full on spoilers. We're gonna talk whatever at this point. The movie basically sets up a cycle with Batman, where he gets called in. So a crime happens, right? A murder is committed by the Riddler. The murder contains some kind of riddle, some kind of like weird clue. And it's all very strange. You know, somebody gets their face taped up, or another guy gets his you know, like a rat cage, you know, locked to his head, stuff like that. So it's pretty dark, and it's pretty horrifying in many cases. But it sets up a pattern where the police find a murder that's happened. Detective Gordon, played by Jeffrey Wright, calls Batman. Batman comes in, solves the riddle, gathers some clues, and then that leads him to some other character that gives him more information, basically until the next murder happens and the same story plays out again. Jim Gordon calls Batman. Batman comes in, solves the next riddle, finds another clue, goes and talks to another third party, and then it plays out again the exact same way. And my beef with it, and I think why I really am not a big fan of the pacing in the first third to half of the movie, is that I think that it's kind of playing on a loop for those first several instances. And there's not a lot of plot advancement that's happening. Like, I'm not learning more about the Riddler. Not really. I'm not learning more about any of the other characters. Not a lot, right? I know that everybody's corrupt. I'm learning that there are more people who are corrupt. Like, with each passing person, I learned that the DA is corrupt as well, and that one of the main police chiefs is corrupt. And, you know, like, okay, fine, right? But what I'm not learning is, or rather, what's not happening is the stakes are not being raised with each successive murder, and there's no time clock on it. And this gets me to the third act problem. I think the third act is a problem for a lot of reasons, and I actually also kind of want to talk to you guys about whether or not you think the movie's woke, because I think there's like the third act gives you an argument in favor, I think, and then other aspects of the movie give you an argument against. But the third act of the movie features a final plot that the Riddler had to blow up seven different I don't know exactly what they are, but they're points along a hurricane wall, basically, that's holding back water from Gotham. And then once that dam is blown up, Gotham gets flooded, right? The beef I have with that whole sequence is that would have been a really great thing to provide continually elevating stakes for the rest of the movie. If you'd known about it from the beginning, if you'd known that by the end, if Batman did not solve all of these crimes before a specific amount of time, right, then the whole city was going to be flooded, then you'd have had a reason to feel rising tension with each successive failure to stop the Riddler between the next murder, right? But we don't have any of that. And it's complete surprise. I think actually, as a detective story, I think it's a mistake, because they don't drop little hints and clues the whole way through. They just drop oh, you're too dumb, you should have gotten it. Haha. Here's a whole set of clues that you didn't know about and that the audience didn't know about. And that the only reason you found out about it at all is because you happened to go talk to the Riddler in prison, and then went and looked at the apartment randomly, right? So that kind of stuff for me, like, that bothered me. But I think the thing that bothered me the most was that there's no elevated stakes over the course of the film. Like, it's just a cycle of murder, riddle, exposition, murder, riddle, exposition, like 3 or 4 times in a row, right? And yeah, it's punctuated by some cool action scenes and things like that. But, like, I don't know. I mean, that part really got to me, like, because it just felt like we weren't going anywhere. And which is sad, because I like the tone. Like, I liked what we were in when we were in it, but it needed to get somewhere, and it didn't.
I think that's fair. That the whole thing about the seawall, yeah, that was really, really aggravating, because it was not set up at all. First of all, I didn't even realize Gotham had like seawalls that were absolutely critical to keeping the city dry. That was
me neither.
I did not enjoy that being
also seems like
in
a horrible thing to do if you have a city. Like that's not a good way to build.
Like that was not at all set up. There were no like standing on the wall and gazing out at the ocean, lapping against the sides of the walls from the outside. Like even just that would have been good. And it also would have played into the darker sort of emo-noir tone of the movie, with just, you know, Batman staring out and wondering where it all went wrong, that kind of thing. But there wasn't any of that. That was upsetting. It wasn't the best mystery plot I've ever encountered. Like, it could have been more skillfully handled with the clues and the rising tension. But
I think one of the seawall thing. Sorry, I want to interject the seawall thing, because it does something that really actually drives me nuts with mystery stories, which is it didn't prep you for anything. It didn't give you any clues or give you any indication that this was even a thing. And then it's trying to trick you at the end as if this is like a big reveal, when the only thing that makes a mystery story really work narratively is if you can then, once the reveal happens, if you can replay the whole story in your mind and go, oh man, there was that clue and that clue and that clue and that clue. How did I miss that? Everybody missed that. Oh, what a twist, right?
Yeah.
But it only works if, in fact, it's all set up along the way. Because if you don't set it up, then it's just a completely unprepared left turn that doesn't have any basis in the story, right? And so it's like, I feel manipulated at that point. I feel like I'm like, oh, wait, so hold on. All these riddles happened and there was no indication there was something bigger going on. And then suddenly we pull up the carpet and look at this. And you're like, well, okay. All right, sure. And then he had the audacity to make fun of Batman's intelligence as well. He's like, you're too dumb. You're too dumb to have gotten this.
So rude.
Yeah, the third act, I mean, okay, so back to the first act. I pretty much disagree with you. I understand where you're coming from, and I do get it. I think what was, for me, the stakes were ratcheted up because we knew who it was doing. We knew who was doing the murdering from the trailers. That wasn't a mystery. It was always why he was doing it. And the murders progressively got closer and closer to Batman. And the mystery then was why? Why is the Riddler just trying to kill this random billionaire playboy who likes eyeliner? Who knows? So that was a mystery. The third act, you're 100% correct on. The seawall thing just came out of left field. And it was, for me, that was the only time in the movie where I was just instantly snapped out of being there. Like the entire movie, I felt like it was they did a great job of setting up Gotham. They did a great job of outside the nightclub. You kind of felt where everything was. So when that last scene where they finally figured out the Riddler was across the street the entire time, that felt, you just felt like
that was great.
Yeah,
that was fantastic.
Great. That was really, really good.
In the movie, right there. Just maybe had like a manhunt and then done.
Yeah.
Roll credits.
I mean, look, okay. So again, the big spoiler here, one of the riddles is, bring him into the light. Right. And the idea is that you think the whole way through that this is metaphorical, right? That, we're trying to expose corruption and whatnot. And in fact, it was metaphorical, but more importantly, it was literal. Like he wanted Batman personally to bring Carmine Falcone into the light so that Riddler, who's across the street, can just murder him, which is like, that's a great way to handle one of those kinds of detective stories. And it's a great way to have like a third act twist, right? It like to go into that third act, if that's the way that we were going to go, it's like, oh my God, Batman was working, unwittingly to him, he was working for Riddler the entire time, doing basically what Riddler wanted him to do, so that Riddler could complete the final little piece of his dastardly plan. And that's a great twist. But yeah, then when you try to, like, it felt like, I don't know if it felt like studio meddling or it felt like the kind of notes that you get where it's like, well, this has to be bigger. It has to be more explosions. There has to be explosions. Yeah. There has to be more somewhere in here.
We haven't met our fist fight quota.
Right. We haven't met our fist fight quota. We got to have more Batman, you know. But then the other thing, too, is that then it also, these are the moments where I want to get into the woke stuff here, because this is where it also takes this weird turn where like now suddenly Riddler's been posting on some kind of online forum, and there are weird reactionaries who have been, I don't know, who've been giving him advice on explosives and firearms. And they're like a weird Riddler militia that shows up at the end. And so I don't know if that's meant to be some kind of right-wing, like gun nut militia thing, or like, I don't know. I don't know exactly what it's meant to be, but it comes out of nowhere. And it also just doesn't make a lot of sense. Cause like, if you think about, well, it's tough with a movie like Batman, because I want to bring a lot of Batman lore into the conversation. I want to try to avoid doing that as much as I can. But like, if you think about the Riddler's character, like this is a guy who is, you know, 10 times smarter than the vast majority of people he ever interacts with. The idea that he'd be posting to an online forum and listening to what a bunch of yokels have to say is like, that strikes me as not a very Riddler thing to do, first of all. But secondly, it just feels like it gets us into the like, oh, internet culture and bad gun nuts. And I don't know. It just had a little bit of that vibe to it, but it just feels so out of place. And then in the end, all it really serves to do is give Batman like another, 20 guys to mow down at the end, right? Like it doesn't really serve any other purpose other than just to be another opportunity for Batman to just beat up a bunch of people.
Yeah.
That was a missed opportunity, in my opinion. I think if you're going to have a character like Batman and the kinds of villains that Batman goes up against set in the modern era, set in 2022.
Yeah.
Yes, of course he's live streaming on whatever platform on the dark web. Of course he is. And of course there's all of these nut jobs who are like, oh yeah, go for it, man. Yeah. And here, this is a tip that I'm going to give you. Like that felt very authentic. And there was an opportunity to sort of demonstrate the danger of that kind of cult of personality and siloing off fringy people from the rest of society, because we can't talk about that anymore. Like that could have been like a really interesting aspect to this.
But again, that also gets thrown at you. It gets thrown at you so last minute as well, right?
Yeah, it's just they brought it in so late. It's not a perfect movie. I'm not going to say that it is. I love it regardless, but like there were some missed opportunities here, and I think that is a big one. And it could have been really cool and interesting, but they just kind of missed on it.
I think another one of these things, and this kind of continuing on this kind of like weird woke theme, is like there's a couple moments. This is what I don't understand about some of this stuff. Is like the movie is actually marred by a couple of these moments that otherwise wouldn't really be a big deal. And so Zoe Kravitz is fantastic as Catwoman pretty much the entire time. Her character makes a ton of sense. Both in terms of her overarching sort of mission of stealing money from Carmine Falcone, which she has a very good reason to do, and that all makes sense. She has an even more personal motive for being involved in most of this, in that one of her friends and coworkers was kidnapped and murdered, and so she wants to find. At first, she wants to find her friend, and then she wants to find her friend's killer, basically. And so that all makes sense why she's in all of this. She's great in all of the cat burglary kind of stuff. She's great in all of the kind of espionage-y kind of stuff and all of the stuff in the nightclub. And she's really good in all of that stuff. And then there's a couple moments where she's like, oh, white privilege. And you're like, why? Like, what does that have to do with? She's like talking to Batman about how he has white privilege for some reason. And it's like, you're talking to a guy dressed like a bat. And by the way, he does kind of have a decent amount of privilege, but he's also pretty messed up as a character. Like, he's not a sane, normal human being. Like, you might start with some sense of like, this is somebody who grew up in a weird way. Like, he was not.
Now, she wasn't
calling him Batman.
No, I know, but it like, just, the whole thing is just like kind of strange to me because it just didn't feel very connected to anything else.
Yeah, it was. I knew. I mean, right when she said it, I was like, oh yeah, the internet's gonna not like this. But for me, it fits her character, and what she was commenting about was that nobody cared about her mother.
Yeah,
because she was a black woman, but they care about these corrupt politicians who happen to be white. But also, she is. I mean,
she's also of course very she said young. That. She's
of course very she said that.
Young.
No, I know. Of course she said that.
It definitely makes sense for her character. I didn't care for it, but
I agree. Well, I sort of agree. I mean, I don't think it totally makes sense for her character in this context because it feels shoehorned in. It feels like something that's like a little bit extra.
When is it
really
not?
Didn't quite. Well, I know it always feels that way. But that's sort of the problem for me is like it. You can see the meddling, and I don't know if it was the way that it was initially written or if it was Matt Reeves or if it was the studio or whatever, but there's this sense that there was just something there that was like a perfectly flowing scene. And then somebody was like, yeah, now make a crack about CEOs and rich. And you're like, okay, why? Like, why?
Yeah.
That scene didn't really have to do with that. And also it's just strange. Like, for the most part, Zoe Kravitz's Catwoman is actually really kind of heroic in a lot of ways. I mean, she's neutral for the most part, but like to the extent that she takes action, she's taking action against criminals and mob bosses and corrupt politicians, and she's trying to save the life of her friend and then avenge the life of her friend. She doesn't really do anything. Like, there are a lot of versions of Catwoman where she is a jewel thief who is just predominantly a thief, and she goes around stealing stuff just because it's fun and she can, and she's good at it, you know? I don't get the sense with this. Like, she has a mission that she's trying to accomplish that, like, she's targeting the right people. She's not going off, at least in the beginning of the movie, the way that she's introduced, she's not going after random people. She's not just going to burglarize like somebody's house just because. She's going after Carmine Falcone specifically, right? For specific reasons. So that all seems fine to me. And then suddenly she's just like, yeah, why don't we just go steal some stuff from some jerk CEO, whatever. Like, it's probably not a Batman move, but
because they were going to go steal from the Penguin, right?
Yeah, but again, Penguin, crime boss, right?
Well, yes, but Batman's point was he's not involved in this. Why do we care? And that's kind of this kind of leads me to, we've talked about this with the Reacher show, about a character actually being a true hero, and this Batman is a true hero. At every point, he's doing things for heroic reasons, and when he's offered the chance to kill people, because that's Batman, so he doesn't shoot people, or have even Catwoman shoot people, he stops her from doing it. He stops himself from doing it. He holds himself back because of that ideal he's trying to uphold.
Yeah.
And he also is confronted with maybe the worst revelation that you could be as a orphan child who's seen their father killed in front of him, that he was actually not a great guy, and having to contend with that and keep your humanity and keep your your ideals that you've been striving for your entire life, and have that rock your world and just keep going.
That was I really liked that part. And it, like, the emotional blow, like, because we all remember.
Brings me to another criticism, though.
We all remember
Alfred mishandled.
Okay. But we all remember the first time that we were disappointed in our dads, right?
Yeah.
Like, people with healthy parent-child relationships grow up thinking that their parents hung the moon, right? And then you get into adulthood and you have just like a random conversation, and suddenly it becomes this minefield that you didn't even realize existed. And you're like, yeesh, Dad, maybe that's not cool. And we all remember that first sensation of being disappointed in our dads. And when all you have is your childhood, like early childhood memories of your parents, when they are literal superheroes in your mind, like they have it. Bruce was like barely into double digits when his parents were killed, right?
Yeah, he's like 10. Yeah.
Thereabouts. Like, my parents could do no wrong when I was 10 years old. I did a lot of wrong, and they responded to that. But like, they were perfect in my mind. And when that's all you have, you never evolved with them into an adult as they guided you there. You just have those perfect childhood memories. And to suddenly be hit with the knowledge that no, they weren't perfect. They made terrible, terrible, deadly mistakes. And you get that information from the bad guy. Like, God.
So I liked that conceptually, but I think the movie, this brings me to, I guess, two other criticisms. One is just Alfred, I think is really mishandled. And I feel bad about that because Andy Serkis I thought was really good in the tiny little moments that he got to be Alfred. I thought Andy Serkis was great, but he didn't really have that much to do. And the relationship that he had to Bruce was kind of strange, actually. Like, Bruce was kind of mean to him the entire time. And in fact, when he got injured and then wakes up in the hospital, literally the first thing that happens is Bruce launches into being pissed at him about something, right? So it's just kind of like, oh man, like you're really treating this guy poorly. But this is the bigger problem. The characterization of Bruce Wayne is like almost non-existent in this movie, and it's not very good fundamentally. Like Robert Pattinson, and I'm not going to put it exactly on him because I think a lot of it's the writing. Like, he didn't have much to do as Bruce Wayne, but also his characterization of Bruce Wayne was he's not a very good person to be around. Like, he was, he didn't do any of the sort of the classic stuff you think about with Bruce Wayne, where he's kind of keeping up with appearances and all that kind of stuff. But he also didn't really express any kind of humanity. He didn't express any like behind the mask, like, wow, this is really tough. I need to deal with this. Like, he was almost, it was almost like Bruce Wayne wasn't in the movie at all, you know? And the one instance where Bruce Wayne is like out in public, it's pretty much just Batman that like clandestine Batman. Like, nobody realizes it's Batman, but there's Batman right there.
Business
much.
professional Batman.
I actually really love this. Bruce Wayne is definitely the least interesting part of the Batman character. And most of the time it just, even though I love the Batman, the animated series, and he does keep up appearances there, I found this very interesting because obviously he's very early on in his career. He's just thrown himself fully into this.
He's obsessive.
And where this is, and to me, it just screams true. Like, if you're going to be a billionaire orphan who dresses up as a bat and fights crime, you're going to be a little weird. And what really, and you have no outside interactions. Yeah. But when he goes to the funeral and then talks to Gordon and the police officers who he has a relationship with as Batman, they have no idea who he is besides, oh, that's the rich Bruce Wayne. And he has no connection with connection with them. Yeah. It's just painful to watch, but painful in like an interesting way. And that's what Batman, I always feel like, misses, because this is such a ridiculous thing on the face of it.
So I think that there's good elements to that. I think conceptually, I think it's good, or at least there are possibilities of doing good things. But I think he needed to have learned something from that. And I don't really get the sense that he did, or at least we didn't take any time to see it, which is like, for example, his big debate with Alfred, right, is essentially like, you are burning through cash and you are not tending the business and you aren't tending any of the financial stuff. And if you don't do that, we won't have anything left. And his reaction, like Bruce's reaction, is basically, I don't care. Like, it literally doesn't matter to me. I'm not going to talk to these finance people. I could care less because I'm only doing Batman right now. And I get that that's interesting because there's like obsession there. And that makes sense. The problem is it would have been nice for him to learn as he learns his family's role in some of this stuff and the renewal fund and all that kind of stuff. An interesting lesson for him for the movie that really wasn't actually like carried through at all in the story is that like he actually can't ignore that stuff because it was ignoring the renewal fund that got them to the point that they're at now. It's also ignoring the, you know, the things like paying for the orphanage and all of those kinds of things that created a lot of these other problems. And so he actually does need to, it's not just keeping up appearances as Bruce Wayne. It's also doing the things that Bruce Wayne can do that Batman can't do, right? Like it's also about using Bruce Wayne to do some of the stuff that's really public or that involves, you know, philanthropy or that involves business or engineering or all of the things that like, you know, you can't be Batman. And like, this is one of the things I actually really like about the Nolan Batman is the conversation that Christian Bale's Bruce Wayne has with Alfred in that movie, where they're like, okay, well, I sourced this part of the cowl from Malaysia and I sourced this other part from over here, but like we had to buy it in thousands, right? We had to buy this stuff in bulk because otherwise it would look weird if we just bought one thing and then suddenly this turned up on the news or whatever. And it's like, yeah, like you got to think that way. And I think that's a pretty interesting thing. And this movie didn't really have any of that at all. And so I don't know. Look, that's opportunities for sequels and stuff. Yeah. So maybe they can go there.
That's kind of where I'm hoping that they go with this. Obviously, they introduced the Joker, and I feel like there's prime room for this. I'm not excited. You gotta work me into that. But I think there's prime areas to explore. It was. The part of the third act is just don't need it. But I think there's prime areas to explore exactly that. What you were just talking about is you can't just focus on Batman because the other part of it can be as effective. I hope they really dive into that with either the Joker, or maybe the Penguin, who attack not Batman, because that's what the Riddler was trying to do, but attack Wayne Enterprises or whatever they call it in this.
I don't. Was it not Wayne Enterprises? I just assumed if it wasn't, then my brain just converted it into Wayne Enterprises.
I mean, I'm sure it's the same, but yeah, I always found the Bruce Wayne stuff has always just not been that appealing to me.
I just think that it's like a lot of things with these kinds of stories. I think the duality can be interesting. It's hard to handle well, right? And it's easy to handle. It's easy to be interesting when you're Batman and you're roaming around the city at night fighting crime. Like that's exciting. It's not nearly as interesting for Bruce Wayne to go to a board meeting or even in like Batman, the animated series. There's so many, like he goes on dates all the time. He's like, you know, he's in various business meetings with people. He goes and meets, politicians and stuff.
He goes to charity
balls, right? but I actually think all that stuff is important, you know. And all right, so let's. One of the things we're going to do, we want to do the ranking.
Let's rank them.
All right, so we're going to rank our top 5 Batman. There are no rules really. It can be animated or live action. You pick your own favorite Batman. We're going to do top 5s though. And I like starting here because I wanted to I want to talk about different versions of Bruce Wayne because my ranking includes Batman and Bruce Wayne. You have to be good at both, I feel like, to be at the top of the list for me. But I want to start with Paul. Paul, what's your ranking? Because I feel like I've got a controversial one. I'm gonna go last.
Yeah. So, gosh, So I would probably say, well, 5 is hard for me because I got to be honest with you guys. There's not a lot of Batman on screen that I particularly enjoy, like George Clooney. Pass. I don't really like Christian Bale as Batman. So top 5 is a stretch for me. So I guess I'll do a 5. So number 5, I feel like this is just kind of obligatory, is Adam West. It's just
Interesting.
It's so different than what we get nowadays, and obviously it's just a 1960s comedy, but I mean it's iconic. He literally built his entire career around it. I don't necessarily want them to do that again, but it worked for the time. So that's number 5. Number 4, Michael Keaton. I think this is the best. This is the Batman in the 1989 movie Batman with Jack Nicholson as the Joker is probably the best movie, Batman movie, I would say. Even though I loved the Batman, I think it's the best Batman. Number 3 for me, Robert Pattinson.
All
right. This I think there's maybe this is a little bit of hopeful ranking that if they were able to do something this interesting and this good for the first movie, then the next iterations are going to be even better, and hopefully they can, if they need to keep the studio out, hey, we could be successful without your help. We showed it, then maybe better. Number 2, this is going to be pretty controversial. Ben Affleck. He is to me like the quintessential button, like to your point, Bruce Wayne, Batman. This was the most interesting Bruce Wayne that I had seen on screen in live action, and he just fits it perfectly. I like I said earlier, I was pretty disappointed that they weren't going to give Ben Affleck his own Batman movie because there's a lot of ground they have never covered, and they still have it now, which is an older Batman who's been around the block and now, but no, can't do it.
Well, Flashpoint, I think, is going to bring Michael Keaton back to do
probably
old Batman.
Yeah, even though we already got one with Ben, but I guess old Batman. And then the best Batman, this is not live action, but it's Kevin Conroy from the Batman the Animated Series. It is that show is so good, and if you haven't seen it, go watch it. It is pitch perfect. It's fantastic.
It's a solid.
I thought I was going to be more controversial than I actually am here. I think you and I are more in alignment than I expected. Jen, what's yours?
All right. For number 5, I'm going to go with Michael Keaton. His 2 Batman movies just didn't have quite the same appeal to me. Like I was still pretty young when they came out. I didn't see them at a super formative age, but going back and watching them now, they hold up. They're fine. I like them. And Michael Keaton's a good Batman. So, and Bruce Wayne to an extent. Number 4 is Ben Affleck. I think he really just did a great job with both sides of that character. All of the reasons that Paul outlined just a minute ago. Number 3 is Robert Pattinson. I just really love him in this role, and I think that there is a lot of room for him to grow, both as an actor and in this character. I think he has the chops to take Batman / Bruce Wayne to some interesting places, and I'm really, really looking forward to seeing where this goes. It is known that he's signed on for 3 movies, so this is the first one. We'll see if the other 2 come to fruition. Sometimes they don't, but please shut up and take my money. Number 2 for me is Christian Bale. I've already mentioned my deep and abiding love for the Nolan trilogy. And I think Christian Bale really pulled off the Bruce Wayne side of Batman while still keeping up the obsessive nature of being the Batman. I really, really enjoyed his portrayal. And I have the same number 1 as Paul. Batman the Animated Series was my absolute jam when I was a kid, and it is absolutely the reason that I love the character of Batman as much as I do. So, tip of the hat to Kevin Conroy for voicing for voicing him. He is my number one Batman.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I'm less controversial than I thought, actually. So my number 5 is Christian Bale. And although I really like the Dark Knight trilogy quite a bit, I think he's kind of a weird choice for both Batman and Bruce Wayne, like in a couple different ways. Like, and also the voice and everything else was just a little bit ridiculous.
Bad. Just say it's bad.
Pattinson did a similar thing in parts of this movie. He did a little bit. I'm vengeance, kind of like. He kind of did,
but they made fun of it. They did
make fun of it a bit, which is good. But Robert Pattinson is my number 4. I think Robert Pattinson could move up this list if I see him like be a better Bruce Wayne at some point, and generally, like if I see more from him, I think in Batman, I might like him better. Michael Keaton is my number 3, and it's because I think Michael Keaton actually does a really excellent job in both roles. I think he's really good as Batman. I think he's better even as Bruce Wayne in certain ways. And to a thing that we were talking about earlier, Michael Keaton's Bruce Wayne is a weirdo. And like, he's so strange, and it's strange in a way that you go like, yeah, this guy is like off. Like there's something very weird about him that is kind of necessary to be, Batman. My number 2, Batfleck, man. Ben Affleck was one of these guys who, when the announcement was made, like everybody was super down on it, and including me. Like I thought it was probably not going to go very well, but he does a fantastic job both as Batman and as Bruce Wayne. And speaking of the Bruce Wayne side again, like he is suave and charming, and he passes perfectly in the world of sort of high society without you ever realizing or understanding that he's got this whole secret persona. And then yet the older Batman, I think sort of Dark Knight, Returns kind of Batman, like really works with Ben Affleck. So props to Ben Affleck. And of course, number 1, I mean, we're all in agreement. It's Kevin Conroy. I think there's no doubt. It's got to be Kevin Conroy. And I mean, a lot of that, it's hard, right? Like he's just doing the voice. So, you could say that this is maybe not quite fair, but as we had talked about before we gave our rankings, it would be like discounting Mark Hamill as the Joker just because he's only the voice actor for the Joker. And I feel like that would be totally unfair. I think he's similarly a great candidate for the best Joker that's ever, done the role. So, yeah, Kevin Conroy. Here we are. But all right, let's rank the movie itself. I'll go first. Like it's for me, I would say like 3/4 of a star. I think it's really good. I definitely recommend it. I think people should. I mean, it's at least a massive departure from most of the superhero movies that we've seen in the last several years. So I think it's worth seeing on that front. I don't think it's a perfect movie. I think it's got some pacing issues and some issues with the third act that needed another look, I think, before the movie came out. But in general, I'm pretty excited with the tone and what they've done with it and where it can go. So, Jen, what's your ranking?
I agree with the 3/4 of a star. This is not a perfect movie, but I still love it so much. And so I'm docking 1/4 of a star for all of the stuff that we talked about, particularly the third act. But I do just go see it. It is good. It is entertaining, and I am really looking forward to rewatching this one.
Paul?
If I could give this more than a full star, I would. Highly recommend it. Obviously we talked about the third act, which, yeah, they just cut it. But I found myself wanting to be in Gotham. It was just the way they were able to tell us, use the city, use the club that they were going back to time and again. It was a fantastic piece of visual storytelling, and such a welcome departure from just the absolute trash that Marvel has been releasing and previously. And now we're in like a couple weeks, we're going to be talking about Morbius. Oh gosh. Just, oh my gosh.
I'm still looking forward to Morbius. Whatever you say, man.
Every trailer I see looks just so bad. And then you got Doctor Strange multiverse of I don't care. Just, oh. But finally, we have something that's interesting and taking a new look at a character we know and love and doing a respect, giving the character justice that it deserves and not just another rehash for some money. So welcome change. Cannot wait for number 2. Hopefully there's a number 2. Hopefully there's a 3. And I'm definitely going to rewatch this. I hope maybe in a theater, but definitely when it comes out to the max soon. So highly recommend it.
All right. You heard it here. The Batman. Yeah, I think the general consensus is it's pretty good. And also, like, if you want a movie where people are really concerned about political corruption, this is the movie for you. And I am concerned about that, and I'm glad that people are dealing with it. Although I would prefer, actually, we didn't really get into this, but like Batman didn't really have an answer to this, and I hope he's going to have to figure out an answer that's not murder everybody. But
punch him in the face.
Well, you can punch him in the face, but actually, no, I take back what I said. He did a really good job with the Carmine Falcone stuff, where he was like, "Nope, we are not going to kill him. We are going to bring him to the courts, and the courts will deal with him, and he will be arrested and tried." And that was it was good guy Batman right there. Good stuff. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening. If you're a supporter of the show on Patreon or a Subscribe Star, stick around. We're going to do some Q&A at the end of the episode, and we'll do a little bonus pod right after this. If you're not a supporter and you want to get access to some of the bonus pods that we do, and also some other cool stuff like a private channel on Discord and some free swag and all kinds of cool things, join us. Become a Patreon supporter, patreon.com/outoframeshow or subscribestar.com/outoframeshow. And we'll see you there. We definitely appreciate that. But if not, be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube. Check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and, come talk with us on Discord whenever you want. So, yeah, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.